Usually, treason is met with a pretty harsh response, but after the American Civil War, none of the leaders of the breakaway Confederacy were tried, convicted or punished for treason. Which raises the obvious question: why not? Why weren't the leaders of the Confederate States punished? Well, the decision to not punish Southern leaders was made by President Lincoln in early 1865. He met with military leaders, and after it was obvious that the war was going to be won quickly, Lincoln made it clear that he didn't want Confederate leaders punished. He believed that the coming years would be fraught with the risk of reigniting the war, and thus he wanted to focus on reconciliation and not retribution. His generals went along with this because he was the boss. Until he very suddenly wasn't, that is. After Lincoln had been booved, his successor, Andrew Johnson, wanted the South reincorporated into the Union quickly. The problem he faced was that many in the North, particularly politicians in the Republican Party, wanted justice to be done. Now obviously, it wasn't viable to imprison or hang everyone who had fought for the Confederacy, and so their anger was focused on the political and military leaders at the top. Jefferson Davis was arrested shortly after the war's conclusion, and there were many in the North that wanted to see him punished for all the lives lost. Johnson actually wanted this trial to go ahead, but importantly so did Jefferson Davis, which is why it never happened. You see, Davis was keen on being taken to trial because it was all but impossible to convict him of any wrongdoing. You see, the idea of the United States being one nation, indivisible, wasn't a thing in 1865. The other issue which made punishing Davis incredibly difficult was Article 3 of the Constitution. If Davis were ever to stand trial, it would have to take place in his home state of Virginia, where he would be tried by his fellow Virginians, the overwhelming majority of whom would have supported the Confederacy, so good luck with that. The same issue applied to the rest of the Confederate political leadership. They were simply never going to be found guilty by people who agreed with their actions and hated those pushing for their imprisonment. And no trial at all was seen as much better than trying to prosecute them and then being found innocent. In terms of punishing the heads of the Confederate military, everybody knew that the likes of Robert E. Lee were completely untouchable too. He and his peers held incredible loyalty from former serving soldiers. And also, Lee was a major proponent of reconciliation from both sides. As such, he had a lot of value, and punishing him and those like him would only make things a lot worse because the mood in the US after the Civil War was extremely tense. Reintegrating the South was going to be hard enough. And so, adding half a decade of military and civil trials was only going to risk reigniting violence, and after such a bloody civil war, no American was willing to countenance that. Which is why things like the push for increasing the rights of freedmen was delayed and eventually abandoned. It was all about keeping the nation together, no matter the cost. I hope you enjoyed this episode, with a special thanks to my patrons: James Bizanet, Kelly Moneymaker, Sky Chappelle, Katoitska, Yuduan Wang, Anthony Beckett, YN Hockey, Marcus Arsner, Captain Psydog, Gustav Swan, The McWhopper, Alex Schwinn, Marvin Kassow, Winston Kaywid, Shuenin, Andy McGeehee, AF Firefly, Spinning 3 Plates, Spencer Lightfoot, Kamoon Yoon, Maggie Patskowski, Remco Heusman, Copper Tone, Jim Stroomberg, Calling Dr. Howard, Dr. Fine, Dr. Howard, Charles I, Miss Izette, and Words About Books podcast.